Later, I think.
At this time, the mayor will call to order the regular city council meeting for 6 p.m. Tuesday, July 12th, 2022, in the city council chambers, 201 East Nash Street, Terrell, Texas. We have in chambers with us District 2, Grady Simpson, District 3, Mayor Ronnie Velasquez, Mayor Pro Tem, District 4, Stephanie Holmes Thomas, Deputy Mayor Pro Tem, and District 5, Tim Royce. We do have a quorum and can continue the meeting. At this time, we're going to have former council member from District 4, Charles Whitaker, lead us in invocation. If you would stand and remain standing for the pledges.
Remind me, seriously, are we doing the prayer first?
Yes.
Okay. Our dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this city. Thank you for those representing this city. Bless each and every one of them and their families. And those in attendance tonight, Father, bless them and help us to do government in a fair and equitable manner, Father. Thank you for your Son, Jesus. We pray all this in his name. Amen.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible.
Thank you, Charles. Next item on the agenda is mayor and council community recognition and events. We don't have any cookies for Charles, do we, Wendy? No.
Take this candy.
We do.
Did you?
Hey, Dora?
No, we're good. We're
Play
good.
cookie for him?
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Councilman. Does anybody have any community recognitions or events? Yes.
I think it's worthwhile to always appreciate our local Trinity Valley Community College. Dr. Algie Allen, the long-term provost of the I-20 campus for Trinity Valley Community College, had his retirement ceremony yesterday. The mayor and I and several other folks, Ray Dunlap, Bruce Wood, went out there. The school district was well represented out there. Of course, they have that great partnership between Trinity Valley Community College and the ISD. So it was just good to say a fond farewell to retiring Dr. Allen. He'll be leaving that post as provost, and they'll be putting a new person in there. So kudos to Dr. Allen for a great career and a great contribution to the city of Terrell in his role out there as provost. And then if I may, I also wanted to mention that we are always recruiting, and we do have a recruitment up through SGR for our city engineer position. And then we are about to post, due to some good work by Carol Holland, the finance manager recruitment up there as well. So two major positions in our leadership team being recruited right now, and just glad to see those out and about. So if you're listening and you are out there and interested in any of those, then you can take a look at our website, or you can look at the SGR website as well.
Thank you, Mike. Next item on the agenda is to hear remarks from visitors. We do have someone that would like to address the council. Ms. Bell, Kathy Bell, if you would please come forward and give us your address, and you may speak.
I live at Terrell Senior Terraces here in Terrell. I would like to introduce you to the new face of homelessness here in Terrell. My name is Kathy Bell. I am 74, and I am on the precipice of being home insecure or homeless. About 6 weeks ago, I came home to my apartment at Terrell Senior Terraces and found a note on my door, which is never good news. It informed me that my rent was going up by 10%, which now means it was over half of my Social Security. This was Monday. On the very next day, I opened my mail and my renewal from my insurance company, auto insurance company, and it informed me that my renewal went up 16%. And this was only with one moving violation in 46 years and no chargeable accidents. When I go to the grocery store, I only have so much left over after rent, car payment, electric bill, etc., that I can only buy some of my needs. I do have a couple of irons in the fire, as they say, but nothing has come through as yet, and it may not. You, as the leaders in this community, need to know that the homeless and the home insecure have a new look. We don't all roam the streets with a shopping cart and the clothes on our back and live in Tent City. We are struggling with our Social Security from paycheck to paycheck, or struggling with our employer from paycheck to paycheck to keep a roof over our heads and food on the table. And I am here today to bring light to a growing problem that needs to be addressed in every city. And the leaders in every city need to support and encourage groups within their cities to come alongside to help those less fortunate so that others can be lifted up.
Ms. Bell, I want to thank you for those comments, and be rest assured that the council heard you, and we'll visit with each other and staff. Anyone else? Next item on the agenda is adoption of the minutes. Item 6.1, discuss and consider the minutes from the regular city council meeting on July the 5th of 2022. Is there a motion?
May I make a motion that we approve the adoption of the minutes, regular city council meeting, July 5th, 2022.
We have a motion from Grady Simpson, District 2. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a second from Stephanie Holmes Thomas, Deputy Mayor Pro Tem, District 4. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, let it be known by stating aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries with unanimous consent of the council. Next item on the agenda is 7.1, discuss and consider Terrell Economic Development Corporation Board appointment, City Secretary Don Stahl.
Mayor and council, there is a board roster in your packet for the Terrell Economic Development Corporation. Carol Oman submitted her resignation, and the EDC met, and they do have someone that they would like to appoint, Shamita Greer. She works for Nucor, and her application is in the packet as well. And this falls under the mayor's oversight.
So I want to first publicly say to Carol Ullman, thank you for your service to the Economic Development Board. She was very instrumental in the EDC, and we thank her for her service to the city. And then also for Shamita Wilson, what I know about her and who I've spoken with, I've heard nothing but good things. She is currently employed at Nucor, I believe, and she's an HR supervisor. She's been in Terrell for over 14 years. So my recommendation to the council, and I'd like to make this recommendation, that we appoint Shamita Wilson to the Terrell Economic Development Corporation Board, and that would be in the form of a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a second from Grady Simpson, District 2. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, let it be known by stating aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries with unanimous consent of the council. Our next item on the agenda, discuss and consider FY21 City of Terrell Audit. This is Jamarcus Ayers, our Housing and Finance Director.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I have Clayton Rogers. He's representative with Patillo, Hill, and Brown. They've been a huge help in helping us getting this audit across the finish line. And he's here today to present the FY 2021 audit.
Okay.
Thanks, Jamarcus. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And before I begin, no need to make 100 pages worth of accounting information sound so exciting. As he said, I'm a CPA with Patillo, Brown & Hill, your audit firm out of Waco, and I'm here to present the results of the fiscal year 2021 audit and answer any questions you have about the audit process or the financial statements that are in front of you. I believe you had all gotten to review copies of the annual financial report, is that correct? Had we passed out hard copies or?
They're in the packet, yeah.
Gotcha, okay. So at the risk of giving anyone absolute complete vertigo. I will avoid jumping around too much. I think I did that a little bit last year, not realizing I was the only one with a hard copy, and I think I made a few people pass out. So I will keep this fairly short and high level. Just a refresher on what we were engaged to do is to plan and perform an audit over the financial statements of the city to determine if they are materially right, materially correct, in accordance with GAAP, generally accepted accounting principles. And in page 1, if you want to scroll to, in your annual financial report, it'd be about 10 PDF pages down if I'm taking a guess. Couple further. Page 1. So on the independent auditor's report, what this, ultimately this report is saying, it's reiterating, in plain English, management of the city is responsible for these financial statements and everything that's in them. We help prepare this document, as is customary, but that ultimately it is their responsibility. Our responsibility is to audit them and to render an opinion. And again, there are limitations on an audit. We don't look at every single transaction. We don't necessarily look at all accounts for all parts of the year. Certain things we're looking mainly at year end, things of that nature. But with those limitations in mind, we're looking for reasonable assurance that these financial statements are prepared in accordance with GAAP. And at the top of page 2, you can see the opinion paragraph where I am pleased to present to you that we were able to render what's known as an unmodified opinion, or you would know it as a clean opinion. And of the 4 types of conclusions we can reach at the end of the audit, that is the best one. It's the highest level of assurance that we can provide. And so with that, just to reiterate again, what that means is that you know, you see monthly financial information and quarterly information throughout the year, but this is the big thing. This is, for example, we were working with Jamarcus and with Mike on getting this prepared for a bond ratings call and some bond issuance information. It's very, very important, the people who you would be issuing debt to, who are going to be purchasing the city's bonds, they're looking at this really closely. That it's great if the council and city management are all very comfortable that you are in good financial condition and able to pay debt service for whatever you want to issue. They need to be able to see that. And so without boring you by going to death by going into every single page in this document, I wanted to emphasize that a lot of those types of things that they're looking for, in our professional opinion, would not be surprising. So all of the things that they're looking for, such as revenue levels, revenues didn't decline, fund balance in the general fund increased, net position in the water sewer fund increased, all of those types of benchmarks that they're looking for, there was nothing, to use a layman's terms, nothing went off the rails in fiscal year 21 that was not something out of the ordinary or anything that y'all had not already been aware of. So again, as far as the financial statement audit, clean opinion, as good as it gets. I'd be happy to jump into any questions about the financial statements.
Are you comfortable with where we are in our reserves as a municipality?
Great question. So one of the things that we are always looking at and that the government industry is always looking at is days of fund balance in the general fund. And you guys are about, I believe the number's 5.3 million is how it shook out unassigned in the general fund. That's about 20% of the general fund's annual expenses for the year. So they're looking, they annualize that out. That turns into a little less than 3 months in fund balance, which is, I'll give this with a caveat, that's right around what the powers that be that think about this stuff would say is a good minimum. So even though it's not way, way over the minimum, the thing I would emphasize and that Mike could speak to in a lot more detail is that you guys also have, the way your fund structure is set up, not everything's in the general fund. So whereas the general fund may on paper look like it has a fairly small reserve, there are lots of things in other funds that are presented elsewhere in this report that also have their own reserves. And that collectively, again, I would say that yes, reserves only went up from last year, and there's something that we would consider to be healthy.
Did you observe any areas of concern that might concern you, that might can be a problem in the future?
That's a great question. You know, we could sit here for hours. I think the first thing that pops into my head, just from a financial health standpoint, is always probably deferred maintenance. But I don't think that's something you as the city of Terrell will probably have to worry about on as much of a macro scale. I know, I believe it was 5 bonds that were issued or refunded this last year in 21, and then several more in fiscal year 22 as well, so that there is new construction going on, there is new development, but that one of the things to always make sure of is that net position can look great on paper, but that if it's just a bunch of fixed assets getting older and older and not being maintained, then that can create a little bit of a problem when all of that stuff starts to break.
Is there a concern with us having money in different, where you had to bring all it together to see kind of where we are? You said you think we're in a good place, but generally, do people keep everything in this one pool versus putting it in all these different little accounts to complicate or to convolute things? What is the trend you've seen based on your expertise?
You know, really, it runs the gamut. I would say the thing that there's really not a ton that Terrell does that is wildly different, financial presentation-wise, that's different from other cities that we've seen. I'd say probably the big different thing is the Public-Private Partnership Fund. That's a pretty large amount of financial resources that is set aside in its own reporting set of funds. That, of course, not every city in Texas has anything nearly as robust as you guys do in that department.
But you would, that's not a negative. What it is just.
No.
Yeah.
Not at all.
It's a way for us to fund projects through public partnerships, right?
Absolutely. I think
And they're legal, and it's a good way to finance.
Yeah, so one of the things that's like a historical note there is we set up the Public-Private Partnership Fund probably about 8 or 9 years ago when we started looking at the opportunities we had under the TxDOT program, where we constructed Spur 557, FM 148, Interstate 20, all of the stuff kind of in the crossroads zone over there. And we set that up so that we could keep track separately of the money that was coming into the city from developer partnerships that were paying for those roadways. So you might recall Buc-ee's, Baylor, Terrell Market Center, Crossroads all paid shares of that. The county paid shares of that, and then ultimately the Regional Transportation Council paid shares of that. So the financial decision that was made at the time was segregating that out so that we could keep track of that separately was a better strategy than running it through the capital improvement fund or something like that. So by establishing it as its own separate fund with its own separate reserve, it just allows us a separate place in the budget to keep track of whenever we're doing partnerships with the county or the Regional Transportation Council or a developer. We know a separate place in our fund structure to keep track of that.
So on some of our debt issuance and payback, the LIBOR, those interest rates that were tied to LIBOR, that's going away. Did we uncover any of our debt that's going to need to be renegotiated at some point that had our rates tied to that LIBOR? No, we didn't. Okay, good.
Thank you, Mike. I was thinking off the top of my head, we generally don't see a whole lot of muni debt, at least in our part of the world, being tied to LIBOR. Okay. But that it's something that, fortunately, if you guys have a good relationship with your financial advisor, they kind of act as a really good set of guardrails on the bowling lane that they're keeping up on that sort of stuff. That I would imagine, if you have a good relationship with them, they would not let something like that transpire without raising a whole lot of alarm.
Cool. All right. Does anybody else have any questions or comments?
There was, as I close, just as far as the audit itself goes, if you were to, I won't make you jump in the PDF unless someone would like to have it pulled up on the screen. At the very back of the report is what's called the single audit section, and there was one thing in there I just wanted to touch on very, very briefly. Because when we're getting ready to present these, one of the things I'm always asking myself is, okay, if I was sitting in your shoes, if I read through this, not being the accountant who prepared it, what questions would I have? So one of those questions was, as some of you are familiar, one of the things that we also do for Terrell is what's known as a single audit. And that's mandated by the federal government, that anytime a government spends more than $750,000 of federal money in 1 year, then the city is subject to a compliance audit on top of its regular audit over the financial statements. And what we do is that we look at all of the federal money that the city has spent, and based on certain criteria, pull certain programs and do a deep dive into those programs and look at the types of strings, so to speak, that the feds have attached to spending that money and using that money. And ultimately, we render an opinion, just like the financial statements, on if we think that the city complied. And this year, we did look at the Section 8 program. It's pretty large and in perpetual, and so you guys are, this is not a new thing. Terrell is single audit every year for as long as we can remember, and will be into the future. And we were able to render a clean opinion over that compliance so that there was nothing, we did not find any material non-compliance with that program that we looked at. However, there was one finding that we did that you will find in the report if you were to look at the very back. And statutorily, one of the strings that the federal government applies to every government that's under single audit is a 9-month deadline after year end. Ultimately, once the audit is complete, a PDF version of this along with a data collection form is sent to a thing called the Federal Audit Clearinghouse that's run currently by the Department of Census. And that by federal law, that this audit has to have been submitted to them within 9 months of fiscal year end. Well, if you do the math, that was June 30th. The data collection form will be submitted in the next couple of days. So the finding relates to that the statutory deadline was missed. And so if I were sitting in your shoes, I might look at that like, whoa, what happened here? And so I wanted to bring that up for a few of you that may not have been here this time last year when we were finishing the 2020 audit. It was similarly, I believe we finalized it in September. But the difference was last year, because of all of the things related to COVID-19, the federal government granted a blanket 6-month extension. Now, there were a lot of trade organizations, including the Government Finance Officers Association, that lobbied the federal government give everybody another 6-month extension to the deadline this year, because they knew that whatever COVID-related things were causing last year's information to be delayed, it's also going to delay this year's information. And that's exactly what happened. Unfortunately, the federal government didn't see it that way, and so they didn't give us another 6-month extension. But that, again, I would emphasize it was not something that's indicative of a massive problem as far as the city's ability to prepare financial information. It was simply more of kind of a continuity of the same things that delayed the completion of the audit last year, that also then in turn affecting this year, coupled with the data breach issues that you guys have experienced in the financial software.
So was there any penalties associated with, or would we be
Great question. There is, but it is not really anything that will affect you guys. So when we do, or when the single audit is performed next year, the way we do that, we pick certain programs based on certain criteria, and we have a list of all the city's federal programs for the year and how much they spent. Since normally we would have to pull programs for a dollar amount equaling at least 20% of that federal total. Because that was not submitted timely, we'd have to pull 40% instead of 20%. However, that really just means we would, next year, the audit would cover more things, and that you would even get more programs looked at, which would really result in more assurance also, but that it's not something generally that would result in any specific penalty.
COVID's gonna be here a while. What can we do now to prepare, to be prepared, a little better prepared next year?
That's a great question. You know, I'm sure Mike could speak a lot better to the specific personnel issues. I know last year a lot of what contributed to it was having the turnover of several key positions in the finance function that had a lot of institutional knowledge carried with them. And again,
I talked to him about that. I didn't realize it was, okay, I thought it was something from your standpoint.
Yeah, I would just kind of walk through the notion of when we have a small staff over in finance and we finished last year's audit 3 months late due to COVID, it's hard to pick up then and be ready and prepared for the next year's audit. So I'd say I don't think we'll have any problem at all moving forward next time around. It's just a matter of getting your footing corrected when you were 3 months late with the last one. So we went from 3 months late to 12 days late, and I'm going to make sure that we're back on track next year to beat it even better. So.
Well said, Mike. Thank you. That's what I was going for.
Didn't want to put you on the spot if it was something.
Oh, no problems.
And two, remind council, we've made some adjustments in the accounting department with some of the software upgrades, things of that nature that's going to allow us to get the numbers quicker. I hope that's the goal anyway.
And I would just also say I appreciate council's support on this, and I think that there's very few things you guys do at council that are more important than receiving your audit, and it does seem like a lot of detail. So I thank you guys for helping us through this process. Patilla Brown Hill's been a really excellent partner for us for quite some time. And I think that Jay and I have had some conversations about what are the processes we want to make sure we have in place. As the mayor said, upgrading software capabilities is a major thing. I've talked to you guys in executive session about changes we've made to our credit card system. I think that's going to help us tremendously with some tracking. And then over the course of FY22, I would say that Jay has had the pleasure of irritating every single City of Terrell employee with some new purchasing requirements, and I absolutely love it. That's where we need to be, and so we will keep the accountability going in the accounting department. I'll put it to you that way.
Thank you, Buck. Anybody have any questions?
Question. Just, I know you want to dive into the PDF, so you're on page 36.
36.
And I'm going to ask you a definition. So what is a OPEB liability, retiree health? What does that mean to me?
Great question. That is the health insurance that when people retire, the health insurance that when they're allowed to stay on health insurance, that essentially creates a liability that if you're allowing people who no longer work for you to continue to be subsidized on a group insurance plan, it's this actuarially, I like to think of it as a slot machine number, that they look at the number of employees you have, what the plan provisions are, like what your premiums are, what percentage retirees will have to cover. You stick all that information in, pull the slot machine lever, and the actuary spits out, this is the present value of the future benefits.
Okay, that is a good explanation. And then another question on, let's see, it's outflow and inflow on the pension. And those numbers, they don't match, and they're maybe not meant to match, but what does inflow pension and outflow pension mean?
Great question. So as this actuarial slot machine, they do it with the pension plan through TMRS, and they also do it for the City of Terrell's individual retiree health benefits. And they do that every single year, and obviously what gets stuck in changes a little bit every year, and what they stick out can change a lot every year. And so under generally accepted accounting principles, there are certain things, certain inputs to that pension liability that they don't want to call or include as an expense this year. So deferred inflows and deferred outflows are simply a parking lot for things that changed your pension liability that the standard setters say, all right, we're going to park this here and amortize it over some period of time into the future.
Okay.
Thank you for staying awake through that because I was...
No, that's fine. Is that normal?
Yes, absolutely.
Clayton, I do have one more question.
Yes, ma'am.
Going back to the missed deadline with turning in the audit to the federal government, correct?
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned certainly having a penalty and how we'll have to look at 40%, the increase of 40% next time the audit is reviewed. my question is really more so around, are there penalties for not turning in the audit timely, or other penalties as well that we should be aware of that would prevent us from being approved for additional housing programs that we may not have at this time?
Yeah, that's a great question. And again, generally, it's something that we say all of that with the caveat that every single granting agency that gives y'all money, whether it's HUD and they give y'all millions of dollars, or whether it's someone who gave you a few $1,000s, every single one of those granting agencies has the right to call you up and ask, hey guys, what happened here? And they can revisit the contract. It's not something that I think would result in clawbacks. That would be if money was misspent generally. Generally, the penalty would be having to answer a few more emails or letters than usual. But that, certainly in our experience, it would not be something that, in the instance of the Section 8 program, HUD's in the business of getting money into the hands of people who need housing support, and that they generally would look at something like missing a deadline like that is more of an administrative issue, not something that they would want to interfere with actually getting the funds continuing to flow to the recipients of the program. So again, it does increase the workload of the single audit next year, really for the next 2 years, based on how the rules work, but that it is something that happens, and that, where every granting agency can come back, it really is usually just a, hey, are you sure that we're good going forward kind of question.
Thank you.
All right, anyone else? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Our next item on the agenda is discuss Tyler Technologies project. Oh, what? Oh, it is, you're right. This is a discuss and consider FY '21 City of Terrell audit. So we're gonna accept the audit as presented, is that correct?
That would be correct, Mr. Mayor.
So, is there a motion on item 8.1?
Mayor, I move that we accept our financial audit as presented.
We have a motion from Tim Royce, District 5. Is there a second? I have a second from Stephanie Holmes Thomas, Deputy Mayor Pro Tem, District 4. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, let it be known by stating aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries with unanimous consent of the council. Our next item on the agenda is 9.1, discuss Tyler Technologies project. This is our IT Library Director, Rebecca Anderson. No.
Well, I'm not Rebecca,
Hey.
Mr. Mayor, but
Okay.
thank you, Mr. Mayor and council, city manager. I just wanted to give you a very quick update that on Friday, we're having the official kickoff for the program, and the program is made up of multiple projects. And so each of those projects, there will be one here in finance with Jamarcus and company that will then lead into the HR project. And in parallel, we'll be running the public safety over at the police department and the courts. So we have those two projects that will be kicking off in earnest after Friday's kickoff meeting. So I wanted to give you that milestone. And as part of that, we have brought on True North has brought on two project managers to help guide those projects. I will be acting as the city's program manager from an IT perspective, and the two project managers will be reporting to me. And then on the Tyler side of the equation, the vendor, they will also have a program manager that's my equivalent, and they will have two project managers that are the equivalents of our project managers. So I wanted to introduce to you and the council, Mr. Mayor, I wanted to introduce to you to our project managers, and they are Kashona Connor, and she will be running finance and HR. And we also have Damon Holzer, who will be running our police department and courts projects. Any questions? Any thoughts?
Council, do you want to hear from either one of the project managers or comment?
I would like to hear, in this budget year, which ends in September, the end of September, what we can expect to have both the project managers implement alongside our departments. What can we expect in the next
So just in the next couple of months or so, as we round out this FY, the major activities in the very beginning are all around getting the project norms established. Now, that's project management speak for, we got to work out communications and how we're going to do status reporting and those kinds of things, getting all of the team members, both on the Tyler side as well as the city side, all coordinated together, get them all introduced and all of those kinds of things. So those are the things that are happening immediately. Today, we actually had these two folks come over today so we could introduce them to the stakeholders in their respective areas, and we did that. In addition to that, we will kick off the requirements gathering session. So we'll hear from Tyler in much more detail than we've heard already about what the specific implementation or software requirements are, hardware requirements, those kinds of things. Our two project managers will then be working with the city counterparts to make sure that we can meet that, and where we can't, we'll do the gap analysis, and then we'll start looking at requirements. And these are things like, do you want the general ledger code to look like this, or do you want this particular business process to be changed this way? So they'll start gathering those things, and those are all the things that normally happen in the first third or more of a project like this, and then it'll lead into implementation and then configuration, which is configuring the software to act and behave as if the requirements, or to meet the requirements. And then there will be a testing phase at the end where all of it will be tested to make sure that it actually met the requirements, and then we'll have go live. And that's kind of generally, but that's what is to be expected in the first third.
As we move through this process, how and when will the council and the mayor be updated as to the improvements, or as we move along? One of the things that I don't want to happen is for there to be problems that come up and then we're not made aware of it.
Sure.
Council deserves and needs to know if it's running smooth, or if we're having issues and what those issues are, if it's going to be more of expense and where that money's going to be coming from.
Absolutely.
So how often do you anticipate coming back to the council? Or maybe this is a Mike question, I don't know.
I'm going to be asking them to give you quarterly updates on the project.
Quarterly?
If there's something that breaks, then we'll come forward faster than that. But I would expect on a quarterly basis, you'll hear, okay, here's what milestones we've hit, here's what's coming next. There's going to be a key moment that will bring a smile to Jamarcus's face, which is on 1 month, there'll be an end of month, and there'll be a start of the new month, and we'll transition from Harris to Tyler, and we're all very excited about that. I'm not going to quote what month that will be, but we're going to give you updates on a quarterly basis so you can see that and expect that. And then your monthly financial report is going to start looking different because it'll be created with a new set of software that will make the whole process a little bit simpler. So you'll hear it quarterly.
Okay, so let's not let the council be unaware of any issues that are occurring. You know, if there's something, you know, not minor, but if there's a big problem, or if there's something that we've encountered or having trouble communicating back and forth, some kind of issue that's going to make reporting to the mayor or the council delayed, then we certainly want to hear about that.
Absolutely. What we actually do is kind of normal behavior is our project managers are charged with making sure that the day-to-day is operating. And when they run into roadblocks and whatnot, the normal escalation path is they come to me, even if it's with city staff and responses, or if it's with Tyler and some issues with Tyler, they can escalate to me, and then which is technically escalating to me and Becca. And then if we can't solve that problem, we will escalate to city manager. And then if there's something that we truly see as going to be a material change in cost, time, or effort, we will bring that to the council, even outside of, as Mike hinted, outside of the quarterly reviews that we would give you.
Excellent. Anybody have any additional questions or comments? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah, looking forward to getting started and moving forward. So thank you, Becca. Our next item on the agenda is Housing Finance Director Jamarcus Ayers. This is 9.2, discuss monthly financial report. Are you surprised we're calling you up, Jamarcus? That's what it says. Am I reading wrong here?
The nickname for this night is the Finance Department Show, so thank you for mentioning that. Yes, sir.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I want to recognize Shelley Wallace. She's a new employee of the Finance Department. I'm very happy about that. She's been by my side through the whole transition in the finance department. When I first took over, we had some long nights trying to, get all the information together and keep the finance department as well as improve it over the time that I've been here so far. And I just want to say thank you, Shelley, for helping us out in the finance department. I present to you the.
Whoa. So the mayor's never going to miss an opportunity to
Okay.
hear from somebody new.
Okay.
Ms. Wallace, please come forward. Introduce yourself to the council, please, if you don't know. Shelley Wallace, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Good evening, council, mayor. My name is Shelley Wallace. I've been in Texas from California for about close to 3 years now. I started here consulting through Robert Half's consulting division in November of 20, and just this past pay period transitioned over as a City of Terrell employee, working with Jay and Juan in the finance department. I have been in finance and accounting my entire career, which has been about close to 30 years. I spent my first 7 years out of college in government. So when I stepped into the role to work under Jamarcus, I did bring some governmental experience with me that's also supported me and also assisted Jay in really kind of transitioning the department to a more manageable, more traditional role, I guess you could say, in terms of compliance, which, listening to Clayton, is going to translate into better outcomes as we move forward. I'm pretty confident about that.
Wonderful. Well, thank you and welcome to the City of Terrell.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
All right. Now,
I'm going to also not miss a chance to
Okay.
praise somebody and say that, Shelley and Jay make an excellent team for us. So I appreciate Jay's leadership of the department, and it's always good to have good folks working for you. Shelley has already been in my office saying things like she's got an idea, and she's got some great ideas for us. So I want to thank her for that. So I appreciate you, Shelley.
All right.
All right.
You're on, Jamarcus.
All right, I present to you the May 2022 financial report. On the front page is just a brief summary of the financial report, but I'll look at each page in detail and go over it with you all. On page 117, we have the net income summary for the general fund. City sales tax made a huge portion of revenues for the month of May. Feel like I'm singing a song.
Keep singing.
Yeah, the city sales tax was a huge portion of revenues for the month. I think it was over 76% of revenues in the general fund for the month of May. So far, we've collected 82% of budgeted revenues for the fiscal year. On the flip side, expenses, we've expended 69% of budgeted expenditures, and right now we have a net income of $4.841 million in the general fund as of May 31st, 2022. On the next page, you have a breakdown of budgeted revenue for FY 2022. Just below that, it gives you a pie chart breaking down revenues for the month of May. As you can see right there, you have 76% of revenue is due from city sales tax. And you have a breakdown for everything else as far as revenues in the general fund. On the next page, you have the budgeted expenses by department for FY 2022. And just below that is a bar chart in red. It gives you the amount that is budgeted for each department, and in blue is what's been expended so far in each department. And on the next page, we have property taxes, the bar chart. We've collected 8.6 million in property taxes current alone, and we are roughly $142,000 off, which isn't extremely bad from what is expected to be collected through this period, which is pretty good. And then on sales tax, please ignore that date at the top. That was an error on my part. Through May, we've collected $11.9 million in sales tax revenue. And what I thought was interesting is in FY 2019, we've collected more sales tax revenue at this point than we did for the whole fiscal year in 2019, which is awesome. On the next page, you have the utility fund. Utility fund collected $1.594 million in revenue for May, and expenditures were at $1.443 million, which netted $150,548. And the year-to-date net income is $386,044, which the general fund is looking pretty, look like it's on track to hit its projected year-end amount of $718,000. On the following page, you have the stormwater utility fund. We had $123,291 that was collected in revenue. Year-to-date actual that was collected in revenue is $953,002. Expenditures were $61,748 for the month of May, which netted us $61,542. And the net income year-to-date is $465,161. So we can kind of expect some more money to be spent on these projects through the rest of the fiscal year. The following page is the bar chart that pretty much gives you a breakdown for expenses in the stormwater utility fund. In red is the budgeted amount for those respective expenditures, and in blue is the year-to-date actuals that have been spent. On the following page, you have the utility capital reserve. You have $202,917 that was collected in revenue from the UCR transfer alone. Year-to-date actual in revenue is $1,923,333, and then on the flip side, you have $120,431,000 in expenditures for the month of May, which nets $82,486, and you have a huge net income of $1,045,813 in net income year-to-date. The equipment replacement fund, you have $126,762 collected in revenue. That's mainly the transfers from the general fund, utility fund, and airport fund. Year-to-date actual of total revenues is $1.2 million, and the expenditures for the month was $166,595, which is a net expense of $39,833 for the month of May, and year-to-date actual for net expense is $19,658, which is still pretty good with in relation to what is budgeted for FY22. The Information Technology Fund, you have all your transfers in that contributes to the Information Technology Fund. Total revenue is $113,787. Year-to-date actual and revenue is $1.5 million. Expenses for the month are $220,682, and total expenses for the month, for the year-to-date is $1.168 million. We had a net expense this month of $106,895, and we're still in the green, as we like to say, of $341,598 in the Information Technology Fund through May. The Capital Improvement Fund, we've had some grants that actually hit the Capital Improvement Fund. Sales taxes stayed pretty high, and we've collected $136,585 in revenue for the month of May, and the year-to-date actual for revenue is $1,509,280. The expenditures for the Capital Improvement Fund for the month of May is $125,730, and the net income for the month is $10,855.
So I'm going to ask council to stay on this page for just a minute, because I think it helps answer a question that came up during Clayton's presentation from Patilla, Brown and Hill. Notice where it says transfer in general fund, and it says budget 2022 up there, and it's got that $915,000 number on it. Remember, one of the things that was made by council as a policy decision is whenever I was making that transition from interim city manager to city manager, I recommended that we take 1/8 of our sales tax, 1/8 cent equivalent of our sales tax, and always transfer that by formula into the capital improvement fund. So that's the exact same dollar amount that goes into your Park and Downtown Improvement Corporation, okay? So that discipline of not taking that money into the general fund and just spending it on general fund expenditures, this means we're spending on capital improvement projects, which is going to be your streets and your stormwater and that sort of thing. So the allowance of and the council discipline of making sure that that money always goes by formula into the capital improvement fund is really sort of an answer for one of the comments that came up during the audit. Are you taking care of annual maintenance so you don't accumulate a whole bunch of deferred maintenance? And as we continue to put money into the capital improvement fund by formula, that's how we're taking care of deferred maintenance issues. So I just wanted to note that since that came up earlier today.
And so the capital improvement fund is in the green, $918,197 through the month of May. The following page, the airport fund. Total revenue, $21,628. The year-to-date actual is $195,000. Expenses for the month is $20,505 with a net income of $1,122. Year-to-date actual net expense is $7,930, which is relatively close to where we're expected to end for FY22. On the following page, we have the impact fee fund. We've collected $42 from interest. Year-to-date actual is $261,515. Expenses is $4,857 with a net expense of $4,815, and we have a net income of $230,980 in the impact fee fund through May. As Mike touched on, you have the portion of city sales tax that goes into the Parks and Downtown Improvement Corporation Fund. Their piece of sales tax was $105,256. Year-to-date, total collection and sales tax through May is $746,464. They've also accrued some interest. Total revenue for the month is $105,519, and the year-to-date actual of total revenues is $307. Expenditures is at $15,000. You had a net income of $90,519, and the Parks and Downtown Improvement Corporation Fund is sitting in a green of $619,333. On the last page of the financial report, you have the tax pool investments. Investment income has increased over 100%, which is good. And the total amount for the month of May in investment income is $4,228.81. And I think last month it was around $1,900. So it's slowly starting to creep up again and get us the investment income that we were getting originally before the pandemic hit. Okay. So any questions?
So is your opinion that the city's looking good financially? as
Yeah.
we begin end the year?
Yes.
Yeah, I agree with you. Does anybody have any comments or questions?
So question, and we're way up on the general fund page with revenue and expenses, and this is for Jay and Mike. So on the revenue part, when I look at municipal court needs to bring in around $60,000 a month to meet budget. In May, they brought in $20,000. Right now, I'm not sure they're on target to meet budget. What's happening with revenues there?
Great question. So Judge Smith and I had a conversation about this recently. What he's finding is that they're still shaking off a little bit the rule book in municipal court associated with how to operate during COVID. And so that's been a little bit of a dampening on some of those fees. We went through a process of trying to prioritize where do we stand with what I would call the highest offenders. And one of the analysis that Mike's been working on, or Judge Smith's been working on, is how are we going to make sure that as we tackle outstanding folks who need to pay us in municipal court, that we're not doing that from a random point of view. We're doing that from a prioritizing those that owe the city the most money through unpaid municipal court fines. So he's working through some of that so that we can try to do some collections there. I would tell you part of what you're seeing is the strain associated with the fact that we are short in the police department. Often we've had a couple of police officers spend a little bit of time each week making phone calls to people who are overdue in making municipal court payments. That generally results in compliance where people will say, oh, I'm being called by a policeman about this unpaid fine. I'm going to come down and pay it. And really the message from the police officer is, look, if you come into the police department and pay it, we're not going to arrest you. We're happy for people to show up and pay. We don't arrest them when they show up and pay. And so we kind of need to remind people of that over the phone from time to time. And we really haven't had time to do that function because we're short 5 officers. We're hopeful that as we get that turned around, we'll get that revenue in. But if you wanted to pick a revenue item that I don't think will hit this year, I bet you we don't hit our revenue projection in municipal court.
Okay, and then I guess my comment would be, just to city management, is while we may not hit revenue, I'm hopeful that we still hit expenses, right? Expenses equate for, well, we still have a ways to climb for expenses too. So if municipal court's not clearing 35 grand a month, we're not going to clear expenses on municipal court. So that's my comment. We don't necessarily have to hit revenue budget, but we need to cover expenses for the department.
And you know what, I'd agree with the council member as far as, you know, when you look at, when you dive into the numbers, it sticks out to you. But in the scheme of the city, it's less than 1% of the total cost.
And
Yes, so that tells you we're pretty healthy, Rick, right?
Yeah.
I mean, right, if I'm able to.
I agree with you.
If I'm able to
I'm
pick on the
agreeing.
1%, then, man, we're doing pretty
Right.
good. And then Greg had something.
I wanted to emphasize, and Tim, you know this better than anybody, we don't have a municipal court to make money for the city, per se. That's not its, that's not its principal function, I guess is what I'm saying. And while that is a way we punish people, the only way, really, but when we do that, we're not trying to be punitive in a way that is unreasonable. We try to, and I would say that in the defense of Judge Smith, and the work I do there as well. We don't, we try to see the justice is done, I guess is what it really boils down to.
Yeah, and as a last sort of note on that from an accounting point of view, remember that everything in here is one fund. So a lack of collecting money under municipal court doesn't mean that we stop spending on the salaries and that sort of thing in municipal court. There's not a correspondence there. You know, it's not like the IT department where it's isolated. This is all of the revenue, 33 million in, and all of the expenditures, 33 million out. So it's all lumped together there.
Yeah, and also remember that one of the purposes of the court, and one that we don't see on a spreadsheet, is compliance. Sometimes they come in and it's for code enforcement or whatever it may be, and we get them to comply. There's no fine, but the city looks better for it. So there's a little bit of cost associated with it. But I hear Councilman Royce, and I appreciate those comments, because you know, he's looking at the numbers when he can pick out the 1% that there's an issue with. So I hear you, and thank you so much. Anybody have any other questions of Jamarcus?
This is for Jay and Mike. When I look at the capital improvement fund, and I'm, you know, looking 3 months forward, by the end of the fiscal year, what expenses do we expect to be paid for the next couple 3 months as it relates to the capital improvement fund expenses?
Well, I'll direct you to the $700,000 one there that says road overlays. That's a contract you guys have approved, and I guarantee you we're going to spend all that money in about the next 60 days. Deferred park maintenance, we've cleared most of that out, so you can see there that's all spent up. Pavement collapse repairs, if you recall, whenever we gave you the presentation on the roadway overlay, I let you know that we'll be making those improvements. We actually just did the budget amendment to add some money to the City Hall improvements, more kind of calling that city facility improvements. So we'll definitely be spending that money as well. The BFTS building pre-construction expenses, we continue to have architectural fees and that sort of thing to pay on that. So those will be spent quite a bit. And that's just a quick rundown of it.
Okay, anyone else? Thank you, Jay. All right. Good job. Next item on the agenda is discuss preliminary FY23 budget. Mr. Sims.
So, Mayor and Council, I'm gonna walk up over here. Okay, great. So, I hope I have enough. Mayor and Council, sometimes I like to give you handouts so you can write on things and get them back to me. Somehow I'm out here. Okay.
Here, who needs one?
Yeah, let me read off mine.
Yeah, use that. I'll get one like, no, keep.
No, it's yours too. There you go. All right, I have exactly the right number. So, Mayor and Council, as you know, we're getting ready to do our FY23 budget, and I wanted to give you something you can write on and then hand back to kind of make a little bit of feedback easier in the process. The first page is I tried to make a top 10 list of things for the FY23 budget, and I failed because I got 12 items here. So forgive me for that, but I was trying to go for a one-page top 10 list. So budget highlights, if it's in the 3-year strategic plan, we are scouring that, trying to figure out what to drag out of the 3-year strategic plan to make sure we implement in FY23. I got to highlight the fact that a lot of our time and effort next year is going to be associated with the public involvement, where you've already engaged. You remember Ian, you remember our JBJ team that's going to be working with us on some of that public involvement issues with quiet zones, complete streets, library. A lot of that public involvement will be going on. That's paid for under those funds, but nevertheless, that's going to be a major thing that's happening in FY23. I'm going to bring forward over the next few weeks and months that we talk consideration for a short-term borrow. So when I say that, I'm talking about a 10-year or a 5-year borrow, and we're analyzing that with Jason Hughes right now so that we could do a short borrow related to getting some new fire equipment. We've got a major pool rehab update that we need to do that will basically be that this is the last year with the slide we've got, and we're going to have to go address that. I think it'd be more appropriate to do that as a little bit of overtime borrowing. And then we're going to see if we can fit a little bit of extra street maintenance cleanup into that short-term borrow, and that would be some additional asphalt work. And whether that's a lot of streets or just a handful of them, we're working on that financial analysis right now. Consideration for a long-term borrow related to cost increases in our FY21 debt-supported project. We did borrow quite a lot of money in FY21. Some of that is for Temple, Metro Drive. Some of that's for the BFTS Museum. Some of that is for town square related expenses. We're seeing all of those have cost increases go up. So the good news is we got a great rate on what we borrowed in FY21, but now we've hit this inflationary period, so we're expecting unwanted cost increases in that. It's never fun to borrow for cost increases, but it's reality, and that's where we stand with some of those projects at this time. We need to focus on staff compensation. We've talked a lot about that. We started out behind market, and now inflation's making that even worse, and it's a little bit more difficult for staff, so that's a thing that we're going to be focused on. Number 6 is we need to address positions for assistant city manager, assistant city attorney, assistant building official, deputy fire marshal, and more than one thing over in the police department. So there is quite a little bit of labor issues that we're going to address and study. As you know, we wanted to get an assistant city attorney hired so that we could have somebody learning from Greg, learning from Mary Gale. There's a lot of knowledge in the Greg Shumpert brain, a lot of history in the Greg Shumpert brain, same thing for Mary Gale. And if we don't have somebody around to start soaking that institutional knowledge up, I think we're going to be hurt 4 or 5 years from now as they decide to make their own retirement decisions. We need to strengthen and stabilize the information technology department. That's the only independent fund we've had over the last couple of years that has run in the red. And you know, we talked a lot about how to fix that and correcting that over time. We don't want to have a negative fund balance there. I think we've got a strategy for that. And frankly, some of those American Recovery Plan funds are really going to be helpful to get that done. We want to maintain our core infrastructure. We talked about that already a little bit today. I think there's some parks improvements that, remember this theory, we don't need to go to the Park and Downtown Improvement Corporation every time we need to fix a fence or restripe a tennis court. We need to be taking that on and not get behind on our parks and make sure that we keep our parks up to date and looking good all the time. So we need to be proposing how to do that on a regular basis. Sesquicentennial items, I can assure you that we don't want to spend too much celebrating turning 150, but that's a great reason and a great way to draw people to our city and draw Metroplex attention to our city. We want to make sure that we do that. We have an appropriate dollar amount there. Alice and I are trying to work through what should be the budget that we'll propose for you for some sesquicentennial spending. Sales tax revenue, it's increasing, so that's good news, but there's nothing more volatile than sales tax, right? You can have one major entity stop paying sales tax or close down or move out of town, and then you're all of a sudden got a hole in your budget. So we got to be very careful about a volatile stream of money there. Property tax valuations went up. A lot of people have seen that in their property tax statements, but remember Senate Bill 2 is really going to cap our total amount of new property taxes to about 3.5%. And so that's a hard and fast state law issue, and we'll be dealing with that as we go through our budget calculations. Franchise fees, that's the one paid by your wastewater provider. Stormwater fees, utility fees, those are all going to need to grow with expected cost increases. We know North Texas Municipal Development, or North Texas Municipal Water District will charge more for water, so we're just going to have to deal with that. And the last one, of course, is one that we'll all say, wherever we can, whenever we can, we need to offset our capital expenses, offset our operational expenses by finding partners to help us do things. Sometimes it'll be the county, sometimes it'll be the Regional Transportation Council, sometimes it'll be a developer, but we got to find partners for everything that we do, and we're going to continue to work very hard at making that happen. So that's a quick list of budget highlights so that you can start contemplating all those and thinking about those as we get ready for budget retreat. Then I've given you this council feedback form. So just a handful of things here, and I hope that you'll spend some time writing on this, hand this back to Dora, take a picture of it, text it to me, however you want to get it to me, whatever you want to do. Give us some feedback. I've already gotten one email from a council member with some thoughts about things for the FY23 budget. So I got 4 different categories for you. Maybe you've got something that's just very, very specific for your council district, right? So you might be thinking, hey, you know what? This is really small, but at this intersection, I need that tree cut. I need this small thing done. I've got a sidewalk that I've noticed here. If you've got a district goal that's just very, very specific to a particular location in your district, give us that so we can be attentive to it. Detailed line item feedback from the FY22 budget. We have a little joke here that some council members have an eye to look at every single line item in the budget. God bless those council members, and you all know who you are. But if you've got a line item that you think you were concerned about in FY22, or you just weren't happy about it in FY22, or maybe you loved it in FY22, and you want to make a note about that thing and say, hey, this is account code such and such, that's great. Hey, give us that feedback. We're happy to take that feedback and let us know. Did you love it? Did you hate it? That's good information for us to be attentive to your priorities. Key items from the strategic plan to accomplish in FY23. This is the email I already got from one of our council members about, hey, love the strategic plan, but really asking that this particular couple of items from the strategic plan find their way into the FY23 budget. If you've got anything that's a highlight like that, just let us know. We're happy to take that input. And then finally, the last one here is we do have our budget retreat coming up here in early August. If you've got something that is of concern for you that you want to make sure we address during that period of time, be happy to do that. You know, I'll give you this for example. How could we not talk about our 2 initiatives to generate future firefighters and then future police officers from Terrell Independent School District? So we've got 2 really creative ideas there that we've talked to folks about. One trying to get a partnership done with Southwestern Christian College on a police academy, another one trying to do a regional fire academy, both of those allowing us to feed employees from Terrell ISD into our police force and into our fire department force. I think that's a huge item that I want to talk about during the budget retreat, because even though that's not something we're going to spend money on in FY23, we're going to spend a lot of staff time and effort trying to make that initiative happen during FY23. So again, whatever concerns you've got for budget retreat, let us know. If you want to hear about something, we'll make sure that we work it into a department head presentation or a presentation by myself, and we'll make sure that that's there. So I just really wanted to use this agenda item as an excuse to hand out a little bit of paperwork for you, let you have some time to organize your thoughts before the budget retreat. Always very useful for us to have council feedback in whatever form you might want to give it to us, but we did give you a little piece of paper here to write on if that might be helpful for you.
All right, council, if you would just take that as a homework assignment and get that back to Mike. Next item on the agenda.
One question, Mike, when can council expect the budget book?
You know what?
Normally,
that is actually in your next agenda item that Dawn is about to answer that question.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
I do have 2 questions. Mike, can we have a reminder on when the public involvement will begin for Quiet Zone Complete Streets Library, or did that recently begin?
So we are working right now on the website element of that, so that when we do some public announcements and have a town hall meeting and that sort of thing, we also have the software website support for that. I've got a meeting coming up soon with JBJ, so I'll get you a date for that soon.
And then I have, not a question, but really a feedback, a request for when we have budget retreat. familiar with assistant building official, deputy fire marshal, police department, an assistant city manager, really a police department, fire marshal, and assistant building officials. I would like to review during the budget review, whether it's handing it to us then and having it as another homework item, but a job description for both the assistant city manager and assistant city attorney, since that's something that will
Sure, yeah.
for a vote in
Yeah.
the budget.
And yes, ma'am, and I know that we had, as you know, a little staff turnover issue happen, and so I know I still owe council a copy of the downtown project manager job description. You'll be getting that soon as well.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Council. Again, if you'll just get that filled out and back to Mike in a timely manner, maybe by next Tuesday. Next item on the agenda is 9.4, discuss FY23 budget schedule. This is City Secretary Don Stahl.
Mayor and council, there is a draft budget schedule in your packet, and basically this is a schedule that assists us in meeting specific deadlines to set the tax rate, to adopt the budget, and look at and to set also the water, wastewater, and stormwater rates. And if you look at number 4, we are having the council retreat on August 4th and 5th. That should be the FY22 through 23 budget. And you will have a book on that day with the draft budget in it. It might be a little after Tim is gone.
Do we have a location for that?
We do not. That is to be determined.
Okay.
I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Are those dates compatible with everyone's schedule? Yes. Yes? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
And just for just say it out loud again, that would mean August 4th, we'll have a breakfast at 8 a.m. and we'll start at 9. And August the 5th, we'll have a breakfast at 8 and we'll start at 9 o'clock. And both of those days will pretty much run till, if not all the way to 5 o'clock, pretty darn close to 5 o'clock. Yeah.
All right, thank you. Our next item on the agenda is discuss rental registration ordinance. This is Mike Sims. You want to do it?
I'm going to stay up here because it's easier to see it. So, if I could get to the first page of this. Okay, great. So, what are we working on here? So, a couple of times over the last few years, we've talked about different things related to rental. And I would say this is great moments in learning. Because we've had different ways that we've tried this idea on and thought about it and never quite got to the point where we had consensus on how to move forward. We've got a way of doing this that I think is important, so let me try to walk through the logic here. First off, why? Why would we do a rental registration ordinance? So the why starts with Woodlands, about 270 units, North Francis, about 500 units, and the Preserve at Rose Hill, with 400 units. So each one of those have announced some element of wanting to do their development as a single-family rental community. So as you know, the North Francis project is the garden homes project that's got about 500 garden homes and about 50 townhomes. That's North Francis. The Woodlands is under construction right now. You can go out there and see lots of homes under construction. Those are all going to be single-family rental. We learned that through a public announcement that they made fairly recently. And then the Rose Hill Preserve, which has a zoning on top of that land. That's the land that basically runs from Rose Hill to the west over toward FM 148. And necessitates the construction of Windsor. They are talking about taking their townhouse portion and then their senior living portion and making that entirely rental as well. So that's potentially 1,200 or so units of single-family rental and of different flavors. And we know that that is going to be a lot of out-of-town owners. We know that we'll have additional multifamily units that we anticipate being at Crossroads, some in downtown, some in some other locations. Remember, our downtown zoning allows multifamily by right on second floor and higher. And those are usually going to be small projects with out-of-town owners who own a second floor or a third floor. We've got our voluntary annexation partners, Hines and Centurion. They'll have options for single-family rental as well. The Centurion project has got a multifamily component to it as well. So as Terrell grows, we're likely to have a dramatic increase in non-local owners of residential rental properties. Frankly, when I first got here in 2008, it wasn't just really particularly hard to say, hey, that rental house over there, we've known that person for 5 decades, and if there's a problem, if there's somebody there who shouldn't be there, if there's a water main break, if there's an atmos problem, whatever it might be, we know our small town, and it's pretty easy to go find the person who actually owns it as opposed to finding the person who's renting it. And that was easier when we were Terrell of 2008. Well, right now we've got city services that range from police, fire, animal control, code enforcement, building standards, water, drainage, wastewater, sidewalks. They often require communication directly with the owner. I know there's often issues where I find out from a owner that they were listed on the tax rolls under one address. A letter that was important went to the actual address. The renter received it, the renter threw it away, and then the intended communication with the owner of the property just went away totally. That's not an effective process, and so having rental registration gives us an opportunity to always make sure we're sending that communication directly with that owner. So for out-of-town owners, relying on Kaufman County property tax records is just not working for us. So you can buy a piece of property, you can rent it out, you can start doing things with it, and it may be 90, 120 days, it could be 6 months before those records down at the county get up to date, and that's just very difficult for us to manage with that kind of time lag. Sometimes those are corporations that own things, and so we don't have anything more than a corporate P.O. box. And I can assure you when the police department's on a call at 1 a.m., they don't really get much out of a corporate P.O. box in New Jersey. But that's the sort of thing that's going to happen more and more in the city of Terrell with all of these corporations coming in and out-of-town owners coming in. So what is it? It's a required registration with an emergency and business contact information for all rented residential units showing phone, email, mailing information for responsible parties. We like a version of this where you could actually list as the owner somebody that you wanted to have on a no trespass. That's very important for us, obviously, because we do have, domestic violence issues. You've got former tenant issues. It might be very useful for folks to say, hey, here's 7 people or 1 person that we just don't want at that address. And that way, when the police department rolls up, they can punch buttons on a computer and they can find out if there's any no trespass flags at that address. All of that can be, of course, confirmed at the time of utility service requests. It can be verified annually. If we've got a little up-to-date system, we can send something out once a year, ping an owner, say, okay, great, reconfirm that that's all still current, update anything that needs to get updated, and then hopefully our owners will work with us to keep that updated. I really don't want it to be paper. We can do this by a website. Other cities do this by a website. Make it easy for data entry and the interface and all that sort of good stuff. I don't think it needs to be expensive. We would propose a $12 annual fee per unit. That would offset our website and administrative costs, and frankly, it would also be the message of, look, this is $1 per month, and that's just not painful, right? Lastly, but maybe most importantly, what is it not? It's not an inspection program. We've had a lot of controversy and a lot of discussion over the years about whether or not a rental inspection program is something to move forward on. I can't look you in the face right now and tell you I've got the staff to do a rental inspection program, and that's not what this is. This is an attempt to get started with, let's just know who people are, particularly these people who might be out of town, and let's make sure we have a database of everybody who owns things. If we're going to add 1,000 rental units in the next 2 or 3 years, we really, really, really need to keep track of who's owning them and be able to communicate with these folks. Also, it's important to note it's not connected with the Section 8 Federal Rental Assistance Program that Jay runs under the Housing Department. It's not related to that, okay? That's just a separate thing. It may be handy to have a little notification blast about Section 8 programs that can go out to these folks, but it really doesn't change anything with our Section 8 rental assistance program. So that's a quick review of it. Greg has provided a draft of the ordinance, which I think is the next thing in your packet. I'm not going to try to read this to you right now, but I do want you to have a chance to start looking through it. There's a lot of definitions in it. The next page goes over to even more definitions. We know we got to define an apartment building, we got to define a duplex, we got to define what does landlord mean, all that sort of good stuff. The next page over here goes through, here's the process for rental registration, here's the information that we would want, here's what we're looking for, street addresses, contact information. Don't just give us a corporate mailing address, give us somebody to reach on a 24-hour basis. Frankly, if you're going to own 500 rent houses in the city of Terrell, I want to know who I can call 24 hours a day when there's an emergency. If I've got an Atmos gas leak, I need to talk to you, and I don't want to have trouble getting that done. There's a renewal program in there. You can see again that $12 fee in there. There's some fines that say, hey, if you won't play ball with us and you won't fill out your paperwork, here's a fine and a violation. And if you have multiple violations, of course, it ought to be a bigger fee. The next page is trying to go all the way to the Duncanville form now. So here's Duncanville's version of this. I will say that this references an inspection program that Duncanville runs. That's not what we're doing, so don't take that wrong. But here's the rental property registration form, the version that they have. They're gathering just a little bit of information. I think I would like to kind of clarify this, clean this up, but I did want to give you a sample of the kind of paperwork that would be created associated with this. And of course, you can imagine that being a web form and something that you can do as an online registration for that. So that's a quick overview of that. I think it's a thing that we don't go into lightly, because you got to ask for a lot of information for this to be useful. On the other hand, it's really not very different than the information that we're asking for when somebody signs up for water utility service. This is just another version of keeping track of who's in our community and gives us a great communication angle. So we'd like to move forward on it at some point. I'd say that my comment to you is, if I look at those houses in Woodlands, we need to do this pretty quick. And I don't want to rush anybody and their thinking on it, but we'd like to get rolling on it. We'd like some council feedback and consideration of it. And then the other thing I'd say is I have to be realistic about the amount of time it's going to take our IT department to do everything else they're doing and get this website set up and get an efficient way to do it. So I am going to say that if we are able to pass this and move forward on this, I am going to ask for a fairly lengthy, and it goes into effect at a later date. I don't need something that goes into effect tomorrow. I need to know it's been passed and then have a period of time to put it into effect, to create the software and all that sort of good stuff. So I'll hand it over to council to discuss.
Oh, I think it's a good idea. Look, the city of Terrell today isn't what it was in the past. As we move forward and we have continued growth, is that me or? Somebody's phone close to my phone. Royce? No.
Royce, man.
You want me with, so I can get on you. So, no, I think it's something that we certainly need to consider, and I'm in favor of it. One of my questions would be, is the $12 adequate enough to cover the cost that the city's going to incur? I don't want us to not cover our cost. You know, Tim brought up a point with municipal court. They're making money off of these rentals, and I don't have a problem, whatever the cost is. If we've already done
I would say that this is going to generate somewhere in the $20,000 to $30,000 range with the volume of rentals we have in this city, and I can probably get you a website set up for $20,000 to $30,000 that will satisfy that.
Okay.
I can't promise that, but I think that's my range for working with my IT company on this.
It just seemed like $12 is awful cheap for, I mean, when you look at the ordinance from Duncanville, it's $25 registration fee, and of course they have another $50 for the inspection. We're not doing that, but just want to make sure that we've got the cost covered. Anybody else have any comments or questions?
Yes, Mayor, I appreciate the staff looking ahead on this. This is awesome. However, I do, maybe this is a little bit off subject, but it's in the realm of what we're speaking about. One thing that I'd like for the mayor and the council, as well as staff, to be mindful of moving forward, speaking of rental properties. I mean, one of the things that my people I represent, one thing they always mention is housing being affordable. And, you know, it's a big concern. And I know we're adding on rentals and, you know, the city's going to grow, but I still think we have to be sensitive, you know, to people that we represent that have those concerns. I know in my district, maybe in Councilwoman Rainey Velasquez's district as well, but I do know there's a concern. And one thing that the mayor said is you know, when we talk about affordable housing, we have to define it. I mean, what is affordable housing? And, you know, where is it going to be? If it's good for, you know, District 1, 2, and well, it has to be good for, you know, District 2 and 3. So that's just something I'd like for us to be mindful of, you know, moving forward into the future, to try to find a pathway, you know, to saying, okay, well, these houses here, you know, they're nice, and maybe they're not the price range maybe what our citizens looking for, but they are a little bit better in terms of affordability. So I just like for us to be mindful of that.
I think that's a great conversation. I would say that I think a lot of what's about to get built in the city is probably going to be a $2,000 a month rental product. I don't think very many people are going to stand up and say that's the hallmark of affordable, right? That's a big number.
Yes.
You know, so I think that you gotta remember that we still need to work through different things that would peg affordability. I've talked with a couple of different council people, and I had a request, and you might recall we put this into our 3-year strategic plan. We're trying to work with Texas A&M on get an affordable housing study done here in Terrell. They do a version of that actually starts with the question that you just asked, right? In this market and in this place, given the wage levels in our city, what constitutes affordable housing? What does it actually mean? What dollar amount do we want to look at to try to bring that forward? So I'm trying to get Texas A&M to do that study here. Some of y'all met a Texas A&M representative at a recent conference. That's the person we're trying to work with to get that done. And I would say they're a little backlogged because this is a popular topic statewide. And so we'll make sure that we prioritize that and get that done.
Is that the same one, Councilwoman?
This is the very same thing, very same thing, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
yeah. We came back from a TML event wanting to get that done. We kind of had a false start on that issue. And then I would just say the department down at A&M that does that seems rather busy, but we're going to keep banging on that door so that we get.
That'll be fantastic.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, yes, sir, yes, sir. I think it's an important priority for us. Obviously, I'm mindful of the topic because we didn't try to create this as a revenue-generating item for the city. $1 a month is not changing affordability or not. It's just helping us keep track of the ownership so that we can communicate with owners. So.
Thank you.
And I would even piggyback off of that. I think the Texas A&M assessment was maybe free, but I would, as a council member, I would be willing to spend some money because it's that important to our citizens. And housing affects every citizen in Terrell, Texas, even the homeless. Housing, affordable housing, affects every citizen in Terrell, Texas. So I think it'd be worth to dig in our pockets, and if we can't get this study done by not spending any money, I think we need to be assertive and show the responsibility to the public to pay for a study. But I kind of think we're behind the 8 ball. We've approved 1,100 houses, and now we're trying to play catch up and trying to do some of these things to kind of smooth things over. Everybody, I woke up this morning and went to work to make money. If I got a restaurant business, I'm there to make money. If I have a auto detail shop, I'm there to make money. If I'm a nurse, I'm there to make money. If I'm an attorney, I'm there to make money. So affordability, when we think of housing, we think about a lot of the population here in the city. When we look at our medium income, when we look at our elderly, sadly to say, these fees, the $12 gonna be passed to the tenant in some form or fashion. If it's $40, if it's not expensive enough, it's gonna be passed to the tenant in the unit. But let me ask a few questions based on this. Just based on your presentation, is it every owner that owns property, or is it out-of-town property owners? It's just across the line. I wanna clarify that. Anybody that owns rental property will be subject to this. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Let's see. And the penalty, is this with the form you showed us? You said it's not the form we're gonna use, but are you just trying to keep track of the owners, not the tenants? Or are you trying to keep up?
I would tell you, I don't feel like the Duncanville form is asking for information about tenant.
Okay.
That's not the intent of how we're doing it, because by and large, we're gonna know the tenant in the utility department here anyway. So to me, that's superfluous information. I don't think that needs to get updated like that. I just showed you the Duncanville form to show you an example from another city.
Okay, so it'll be mostly just to keep up with the owner and the
Yes, ma'am.
businesses that's coming in and building these large amounts of homes. Okay.
Well, so, just to clarify.
Can I just clarify one thing first? So remember, the state law involved here is that I can't, we cannot as a city create a zoning category and say, that's for single-family home ownership only, and then this zoning category over here is for single-family rental. When we have a zoning category for SF5 or SF6 or FS 7.5 or townhomes or whatever, all of that is strictly by state law, something where the owner themselves can decide, are they going to rent that property or are they going to sell it for home ownership? And so we're just reacting to that state law issue.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mike, I have a follow-up questions here regarding the actual ordinance language. Looks like, so I understand that each landlord will complete a one-time registration of $12 for the first unit, plus $6 for each additional unit. Receive the certificate of registration that is valid for 12 months. Once that certification expires, they'll have to renew. Section D, the renewal of registration, Section 5, talks about failing to renew and how that will constitute a separate offense, but I don't have a definition. I would like us to be more clear on the definition of what it means when you fail to renew your registration, and what a separate, what that separate offense consists of. Is it, a financial penalty, and if so, what amount that might be? And at the same time, I don't see anything, I don't believe I saw anything in here that discusses or that really addresses whether someone, the city realizes a landlord failed to register a property. So, how many opportunities or days do you get once you've been notified? And if you fail to do so, does that fall into the category of, an offense, and how much,
Let me talk back and forth here, because I know Greg will want to answer this as well. I think maybe a thing you're pointing out is, I don't know that sometimes we'll write a grace period into an ordinance and say, hey, an owner who's notified has 30 days to correct, or blah, 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 right? So if we have a genuine failure to do so, but then we tell an owner and the owner says, oh, my mistake, I'm sorry, I'll get that done right away. are we really going to apply a $500 fine? Well, that's not really our common practice anyway, right? Our common practice is to say, hey, if you don't do it, we're going to have to fine you on this. If council's more comfortable, and frankly, I might be as well, to say, hey, you know, everybody gets a 30-day grace or a 90-day grace period. So, you know, we can work a grace period in there. That's no big deal. If council be happier if the first offense is a lower dollar amount, just tell us the first offense should be a lower dollar amount. The reason you make a further offense a higher dollar amount, and we do this throughout our ordinances, where we say, hey, the first time is a low number, but if you're going to keep doing that and you're just going to play a game with us about getting away with it, then that's where that fee comes into effect. And so if you feel like we need to polish any of that language, we'd be happy to do so. Greg, you might want to just also address I'm sure you're about to say, the prosecutorial discretion part of this and the court process. Yeah.
Now, what you have to understand, me, Ronnie, is those fine amounts are ceilings that are placed upon the court. We can't go over that. You see what I'm saying? If a judge, or if I as the city attorney look at something, if I see somebody's complied, I don't ask for a $500 fine. Goodness knows. It's kind of like we see with code enforcement. It's a lot of things. What we're after here is compliance. It's just like what the mayor was mentioning earlier. We're not here to jack anybody's fines up. We're here to get compliance with what we need, the information that we need. So if we get that, that's going to play a lot of how court addresses those things if it ever gets to court. I know our Judge Smith, is very understanding about things like that. I very rarely see him imposing maximum fines. I have seen him do it, but in very aggravated situations. But as a general rule, he's going to look at each case individually and assess a fine that he feels is appropriate under each case scenario. Those are just ceilings. And that means that everybody that goes in there is going to get a $500 fine.
So let me go over to the...
Here on the very last page where I didn't make it to quite yet, that there is a penalty section upon conviction.
Yes, ma'am.
Not to exceed that ceiling of
Right.
$500.
That's right.
Upon conviction.
Right.
After conviction, yes,
Yeah.
ma'am.
To go back to the first half of your comments, you were also referencing the schedule of payment. So if it's not stated clearly, we can of course polish up the language on it. The intent is to say each year, each unit will pay $12. We notice that one of the things that's likely to happen here is you're going to have people who have a multitude of units. And so our thought was, well, there may be some efficiencies there where maybe we say that for and I believe we've got it written now as after the first 10, then additional units you have after the first 10, we're going to cut that fee down to $6, essentially 50 cents a month, because maybe there's a little bit of the efficiency in the IT system there of, hey, you've got a whole bulk of these, or a lot of these are at the same address, or something like that. So again, that's not intended to be perfect, but nevertheless, that was an attempt to say, hey, for somebody who owns a multitude of these, maybe the dollar amount is a little bit different. We know that in other rental communities throughout the Dallas-Fort Worth area, let's say you start out with a rental community with 100 houses, and they're all under one ownership. Well, over the course of time, what'll happen is that owner will say, you know what, I need a little extra cash here. I'm going to sell 10 of them to my friend Bob. Well, then Bob's got 10, and the other guy's got 90. And then 3 or 4 years later, Bob sells 4 his to his kid, and then somebody else inherits the other half of them, and then so on down the line. 20 years later, what you thought was going to be 100 rental units all under one entity is, 100 rental units under 15 entities, right? And so you might think, oh man, that's going to become really hard to manage. And it gets into, why are we doing this, right? We got to make sure we're keeping track of, oh, that address has that. When I've got a neighborhood that's all under one ownership, I think there's some economies of scale there, and we're just trying to reflect that in the fee schedule. Is it perfect? I wouldn't say our numbers are perfect. Our numbers are our first attempt to get a number out there and say, I think this is reasonable, and I think this will pay our costs.
2 more
Yeah.
points your feedback, and then I'll yield my time over to Councilmember Roy. Or the floor in this case. Certainly, looking for the Spanish form.
Yes, ma'am.
So the Spanish feature, once, if we decide to go in this direction, would be looking for a Spanish form and set of instructions as well. And then I was glad to see Duncanville, at least, what one city's practices is. And I'd be interested to learn more about, what are other cities' best practices in terms of registering properties, rental properties, and if that's, if that's how we created our ordinance.
Yeah, so, real quick.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, real quick, I just want to make sure that council understands that the tenants are held harmless. It's not the tenant's responsibility to register, it's the owner's. So if you're a tenant and the address isn't registered, you're not going to be fined or penalized, the owner would be. Again, it's a minimal cost, in my opinion. $12 on rental fees is, man, if you take that out on the tenant, I'd like to talk to you, because $12 out of your pocket to register your home that you're making income just isn't much money at all, but it does help the city in what we're trying to do, and I don't have an issue with it. Go ahead, Tim.
So I just wanted to say I'm supportive of it, and I'm glad we kept the cost down on this one. It's less of an argument for landlords. Also, then I would say, Ronnie mentioned best practices, so I'll say, hey, council, if there's anything you feel squeamish about, because this one's pretty common sense, but if you feel squeamish about a grace period or a first offense fee, then I'd say, hey, contact Mike. Contact him before the next meeting, and let's just be efficient with our time in public.
One thing you're gonna find too, Tim, that most cities, at least the ones I've looked at, have, and Mike mentioned this too, they have inspections. Now, we've been down that road. I don't know if any of y'all, I know the mayor remembers us going down that road, and it didn't work out too good. So we've scrupulously avoided that for a variety of reasons. One, it didn't seem like that was something that the population here wanted. Secondly, I don't think Mike has the staff for it right now anyway. So when you look at what other cities are doing, I think that's something you have to take into account, is that most of them do inspections as well. Maybe sometime, there may come a day when we want to go down that road again, but it's not right now.
I'm going to just tell you flat out, we're busy enough trying to inspect hotels in this city, and we have really hit some home runs in code enforcements this year, looking at some hotels in town and making sure that they were clean and tidy and presentable to guests and that sort of thing. So we're on full in code enforcement. Thank you very much.
So
I just want to clarify this too. On page 142, there is a portion where you do have to include the tenant information as far as the occupants, right? It looks like that's on page.
If we've got that in there, I can make sure that we take that out, because that was not our intent. I can get that.
Well, wait a minute though. If you're gonna enforce, if you're gonna enforce,
But we don't have to say who it is. We're just gonna have to say that they've changed occupants. The owner.
no, if you're gonna enforce a no trespass, or if you're gonna file a complaint,
No,
you need to know who the owner is.
I'm gonna say, hey, Greg, I'm gonna say that my comment to you is, I don't want us to forget that the left hand needs to know what the right hand's doing. We don't need this form to track the tenant. If the tenant comes in, we're gonna know it changed because they're gonna set up a different water account, right? So I don't need to go through that burden, right? We need to streamline this thing. We don't need to add a complication.
So really, all we're gonna have is the owner and the address, and know that it's a rental.
We're going to give the owner the opportunity to tell us anybody they want on no trespass. That is a really big deal. It is very, very crucial. We have a lot of folks in this city who already have communicated that, hey, I own this, and my ex-husband is on a no trespass. I gotta have that information, and I gotta track it, and I gotta give the owner of a rental property the opportunity to easily tell me that information. So we're gonna make sure that that's part of this form. Yeah.
So, I would say this, let's get this thing worked out. If you have any questions, get with Mike and see if we can get something back to the council next Tuesday.
Mayor, this is something that is great for Terrell. Yeah. And I do know that we like to maybe look at other cities and maybe try to measure Terrell. I really don't want us to get into the habit of that, because we're at a process of new growth, and we're having to manage that, you know, as we move forward into our future. I do know at times we have measured ourselves against other cities, but it's not a big deal with me. My thing is, what is the best decision for Terrell? I don't think it's a one-size fits all, you know, when we talk about other cities. So I do know that the comparison can be good in special cases, but no one that I know of, no towns that are around us are growing like Terrell and doing what we're doing in our county. So we got to keep that in consideration.
Yeah, and I don't want to pretend that I've done this in the last 2 weeks or anything, but over the last few years, we've definitely kept track of this issue. I'll tell you what cities do that's different. Some cities require an education program for every landlord, and they say, hey, if you have a rental property in our city, we want you to fill out something that says that you've learned this stuff, you know the renter's bill of rights, blah, 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 and they require you to kind of prove that you've read state law stuff recently. For years, the city of Dallas would make people show up to a class once a year and learn how to be a good landlord, right? I don't have the staff for that. I'm not proposing that. I don't think that's the world we're living in right now. And then the same thing, we already had the inspection discussion. Some people do that. We already have a program that's in a different ordinance passed by council, I think in 2017, where if you want your, prior to move-in, if somebody comes up to the utility department window over here and says, hey, I'm hooking up water, I'm renting this house, I just bought this house, whatever it might be, can the fire department come in and do a safety check for me? We have a safety check program, and so that's available. If so, somebody walks into a single-family house they just bought, somebody walks into a single-family house they just rented, treat them both the same. If they call up and say, I feel unsafe, I think there might be something wrong here, they can contact us and we go out and we look at that property. So we handle, I don't want to call that inspection, we handle, is there a safety concern on the request of somebody moving into a house, and that's across the board, and that's contained in an ordinance from many years ago. Yeah.
Mike, I think this ordinance does make sense. I like the caveat, you know, where I was just trying to make sure, because I saw that in there about keeping up with the tenant information. You'd be surprised how many moving parts sometimes you have with this, but I just think just any smart business owner, you'll use all your, you count all your expenses like we do as a city. We're gonna manage those appropriately. So our expenses are based on how we set the other expenditures that we have based on that. So it's not shame on you because you did this.
Yeah.
It's business 101.
Yes, ma'am.
You got to have a certain amount coming in, because I got to pay the city, I got to pay the county, every year I got to pay the school. If not, we won't move forward. So based on that, it's not a shame on you, it's just business.
Yes,
you have to make sure your numbers match, regardless of how minuscule they are to some, to others. Everybody is not in the same current living situation. Our budgets are all different. 20% doesn't bother me that much, but it may somebody else that makes $600 a month or $800 disability. I get it.
Yeah.
I hear you. Thank you for bringing this forward.
Okay.
And I just want to make sure I asked the right questions to make sure I understood what was written on paper, okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, sir.
Absolutely.
The bottom line on that is that those who use the system basically pay for the system.
Absolutely.
That's really what it comes down to.
So, next item, are we gonna
Thank you so
pass on the Breezy Hill Community?
Yeah, Park Board's got some more work to do in item 9.6.
All right, do we have executive?
Yes, sir, we do.
Excuse me. At this time, we're gonna adjourn into executive session in accordance with section 551 Government Code to discuss the following. Section 551.071, consultation with attorney pending or contemplated litigation. Section 551.072, deliberations regarding real property. Section 551.074 personnel matters, and Section 551.087. This time, we're going to reconvene into regular session and consider action, if any, on items discussed in executive session. Are there any motions? Hearing none, we are adjourned. Thank you all.
Good meeting, Mayor.